Hello and welcome to a brand new airplane on the table today, and that is the all-new E-flite 1.0 meter P-51D Mustang. Yes, that's right, another P-51 Mustang, which to some people was a bit of a disappointment because they say, well, it's just another Mustang. But for those of us who happen to love Mustangs, this thing is an incredible new addition to the hangar. And the reason is because this brings back some of that original ParkZone style of airplane, simpler type of airplane, no flaps, no retracts, 3S powered, 2200, belly land, hand launch, fixed landing gear that are removable, kind of harking back to that old school ParkZone way, which when I was starting to learn how to fly, those ParkZone models were the kind of the pinnacle of the foam warbirds that were available. There weren't a lot of warbirds available at that time, and if you wanted to get into something that you could afford and you could fly and that was attainable and all these wonderful things, it was one of the ParkZone models. And they had a fantastic lineup of the all-time classic warbirds: Spitfire, Mustang, P-47, Corsair, T-28, the classics, the legends. So those have kind of gone away, unfortunately, as people started to demand more and more power. They want more features. They want more and more of everything. Well, that more and more of everything leads to a higher price, heavier models, bigger airplanes, bigger area needed to fly them. It just starts to increase the amount of complexity with the airplane, and to some extent the complexity of just even owning the airplane. Now you have to go to a bigger flying field. You need a nicer runway. You need a better surface. Gone are the days of the simple models like the ParkZone models used to be. So E-flite has kind of gone full circle and brought back something of that kind of that classic ParkZone feel. Now, some people say, oh, this is a ParkZone model, right? No, it's not. It's actually all new, right from the ground up, brand new design. It is not the ParkZone model from olden times. It is not the 1.2 meters scaled down. It's not the 1.5 meters scaled down, nor is it the UMX scaled up. It is a ground up, all new design, brand new P-51 Mustang. So, with that said, I was going to do, in fact, well, I did an unboxing video, I did an assembly video, and this was supposed to be the overview and historical video, but as I found out in editing, none of the videos actually recorded any sound. So, there's no airplane in here, it's already out of the box, so we're gonna go ahead and just move this off to the side here, and we're gonna grab the airplane and bring it out and actually talk about it now that it's assembled. So a couple things you missed from the unboxing video that was never was published because it didn't work. The airplane, of course, was very well packaged in the box. It's safe. It's typical way that E-flite packages things. It's very safe for transport inside here. There's only a few parts: fuselage, horizontal stab, and wings and landing gear. It is just a few pieces. You get the instruction manual with it, you get some hardware, and your bind plug. There's really not much to it. So you didn't really lose much by not having a unboxing video, just because there's not a lot to this particular thing, and there's really, in hindsight, probably didn't even need that video anyway. In terms of assembly, super easy to assemble. It's the wings, the horizontal stab, and the landing gear. That is it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and grab the airplane and put it on the bench. But the one thing I did mention in the unboxing video that was never meant to be was the fact that I was planning on doing some detail work, some weathering, some painting, and some additional things to the model before I came back to shoot this one. And so you're going to see the model in its completed state, and unfortunately you will not see it in the previous state. I have a couple pictures here that I took of the airplane just basically after I did the unboxing video and the assembly video, before I did the detailing, and I'll show those. You can see these kind of going through the video right now while I'm talking, and that's how the airplane looked when it was out of the box. And there's nothing wrong with how the airplane looked out of the box. I think it's a fantastic looking plane. It's awesome, but half the joy of this hobby for me is actually modifying and tweaking and detailing and modeling of the airplanes. And so, yeah, even though that this airplane here is most certainly not going to win the Top Gun contest for scale accuracy and everything like that, it's not meant to be. It's meant to be a wonderful flying airplane that gives you the enjoyment of flying a Mustang without all the headaches of flying a Mustang. But that doesn't mean you can still, you can't have some fun with it in terms of some modeling. So with that said, I'm going to get the airplane out now, but I definitely wanted to mention that the way the plane looks now is not necessarily exactly how yours will look straight out of the box, because unfortunately, that video showing it coming out of the box has been lost, as along with the assembly video, and so you're going to see mine in its kind of modified state. So let me go ahead and grab that. All right, so here's the airplane in its completed assembled state with the modifications that I have done with it, so I will cover those as well in this video, as well as a little bit of the historical significance of this particular paint scheme and why it looks like this rather than the original ParkZone model, which had an all green upper surface with white ETO stripes over the top of the wings and the tail, and the full yellow nose. That's how most people associate the airplane. There's a restored one that flies, I believe, in Turkey that's in that scheme, but I'll cover a little bit later on exactly why it's this scheme and not the others. So, in terms of what do you get in the box? Well, you get the airplane. It comes with the fuselage fully assembled. The prop, the spinner is on it. It is a one-piece wing. It only takes 2 screws here on the leading edge to install. It's got a hands-free connection in the center along with where the receiver is stored. It's got pins in the back that kind of lock this whole assembly in. This is plastic, by the way. So for those of you worried about belly landing, that is a plastic radiator scoop. The horizontal stab slides in. You have to connect the push rod, and it's 2 screws, one longer than the other, so make sure you get that right. And that is the entire assembly process. And then, of course, just snapping in the landing gear. Although, if you wanted to just go right to the flying field and skip the landing gear, you could do that. The tail wheel is removable, which is nice. So you can actually remove all the landing gear just like you can like on a UMX plane, or you can leave the landing gear on. I will probably start with the gear on to start with, to get the plane dialed in and get comfortable with it before attempting to hand launch. Now, a couple features of this airplane that in particular make it very different than the original ParkZone models is that this has new AS3X Plus. This is the very first airplane that I have and I will have ever flown with AS3X Plus. Now, that new system, from what I have seen, is quite phenomenal in terms of locking this airplane in. It's hard to really describe it in a video. It really took me seeing how AS3X transformed an airplane versus having it turned on and off. The new features that are on the new Plus system just lock in the airplane and make it fly just incredible. It's like I said, it's hard to explain without seeing it. But I saw an extra 330 flying with it, and the difference between it being on and off with a pretty steady crosswind was quite significant. The airplane looked far more locked in. It looked steady. It looked like it was a real aircraft flying out there rather than an RC plane where it's bouncing around and kind of moving in the wind. I've never seen anything so locked in before, so I'm excited to see what this P-51 will do with that. It also has Safe Select, which is nothing new for a lot of the E-flite models, but the original ParkZone did not have that. That's going to be very useful for hand launching. So for hand launching the aircraft, my plan is I will put it in safe on mode, fire up the throttle, give it a nice good toss, let Safe handle the airplane while I get my hands back on the controls again. I will pull the aircraft up into a slight climb and out into the flying pattern, and then once I climb out and I'm feeling confident with the airplane, I'll just turn Safe back off and finish the rest of the flight without it. What I like about hand launching with Safe, it keeps the wings level, and it also prevents a lot of heavy pitch up and pitch down motions, and a lot of times that will destroy a good hand launch. So plan on just putting it over my head, give it a nice firm toss, let Safe keep the airplane in a nice steady state of flight. I'll get my hands back on the controls, get everything set where I'm comfortable, and then I'll go ahead and turn it off. But like I said, I will try this with the landing gear on first. Plus, I'm also curious to find out with AS3X Plus whether or not it has any form of heading hold set in from the factory and how that will keep the airplane going straighter down the runway and counter the torque from the prop. One of the big hassles of flying the 1.2 meter and the 1.5 meter P-51 Mustang, and really any of the 1.2 meter warbirds that are tail draggers, is dealing with the P factor and dialing enough rudder in to get the airplane going straight down the runway. Now, this does have a two-blade prop, so that should actually make it a little bit easier. It's not nearly as powerful as those aircraft, so hopefully it's going to be a little bit more manageable. But I have a feeling, based on what I've seen with AS3X Plus, that if it's got the same type of a heading hold, or if I can adjust that heading hold, there might be a way to actually dial out some of that P factor by using the gyro stabilization system to my advantage. So it is not the same as the ParkZone models, even though that's what a lot of people have said. It has a lot of new enhancements, especially in terms of the electronics inside of it. It also has, I think it's got the Smart ESC in it as well. It would be the Spektrum Avion one, so you will get some voltage telemetry out of that as well. I do plan on flying with Spektrum batteries. Right here I have a 2200 4S pack. Although a 2200 3S is probably going to be my preferred battery. I just happen to have this one available since I was using it to bind the airplane up and use it on another project as well. So, but I will plan on using the 2200 3S packs, but I will try a 4S pack just to see what it's like. I fly the rest of my old ParkZone style airplanes. I say ParkZone style because they're the ParkZone models, but they were sold under the HobbyZone name and the E-flite name, but their origins are most certainly the original ParkZone planes, and I fly the Corsair and the P-47 on a 2200 3S pack, and they're fantastic. I don't see any reason at all to fly in a 4S pack with those planes, and I really don't think 4S is needed on this. The joy of flying these is the fact that they're fun, they're enjoyable, they're kind of almost relaxing, and they're just they're just fun. Let's just be honest, they're just fun. And I think going to 4S and trying to turn this thing into an SR-71 is a bit silly. If you want an SR-71, you can go get one of those too, and it will fly on a 4S pack, and it goes fast and it does all these things. I enjoy flying a little bit more sedate and not trying to break the sound barrier with my airplanes, and I'm more than happy to fly with a 3S pack. I know I can almost hear the keyboard warriors out there getting very angry with me, saying that I recommend flying with a 3S pack over a 4S pack. That's what I enjoy. My decathlon, fly it on 3S. My 1.2 meter warbirds, a little bit of a split between the two, but for the most part, I just enjoy the 3S packs a little bit more, and I love them in the smaller 1.0, 1.1 meter size airplanes. Plus, I got a whole mountain of 2200 3Ss, so it works out pretty slick. In terms of binding the airplane to your transmitter, I'm going to be using my NX8 for this aircraft. This has a new feature that I've never had any experience with before until I bound it up actually today. This has the ability to send the program for the transmitter from the receiver to your transmitter during the bind process. No more setting the plane up from scratch or reading the manual or doing anything like that. It will literally send the file directly to the transmitter. To do that, you follow the instructions in the manual, which are really super simple. It talks you through exactly how to do it. But in the gist of it, you create a new model in your transmitter, so it's just a new plain blank model. You go through the bind process like you always would, and when you bind it on the transmitter, you'll see a menu come up that is asking, do you want to use that file? You hit, yeah, load that profile on. And then it will ask, do you want to overwrite whatever information is in that acro file or that blank file that you start with? And you say, yeah, because it's just a blank file. Once you do that, it takes a few minutes. It will do its auto configuration, and when you are done, all the settings you need to fly the airplane are now in the transmitter. for me, I don't necessarily know it was any quicker. This is the 9th P-51 that I have set up on a transmitter, and I can pretty much set these things up in my sleep. I know exactly what settings I want, I know what voice commands I want, I know where I want all my switches set, and honestly, this is not a complex airplane to set up. No flaps, no retracts, there's just not a lot to it. This is a very easy setup. But I wanted to experiment what that was like, to at least see it and have a good understanding of how that worked, so I could at least speak to it. And it does work remarkably well. But I think in the end, I spent more time undoing the factory programming to put in my preferences than just starting directly from scratch. But I think that's a really cool feature, and I think it has a lot of potential as you move up into more complex airplanes. So I assume there'll be more airplanes that come with that in the future. I don't really know, but I would say that if it came out on this, it will probably come out on future models as well. And I think as you get into more complex airplanes, flaps and retracts and any type of mixing between flaps and elevators and all this other stuff, that programming will become more and more beneficial. This airplane here, relatively simple to set up, so it really didn't do a lot for me. But I know a lot of people struggle with how to set up an airplane. So that's a big help for them. You can also just follow the old school instructions in here. The setup instructions are really simple as well, but I know some people are intimidated on setting an airplane up. So there's a couple ways you can do that. This airplane is not complex to set up, even if you wanted to just do it from scratch. So I think that covers the majority of topics that I was trying to cover in the other videos that unfortunately never came to fruition because of the audio error. So now that brings me all the way to what I was hoping to cover in this video, which is the scale detailing, the added things I did to the airplane, as well as the reason for the scheme. And I think from that, I'll start with kind of the reason the scheme is what it is. So we're going to kind of set the Wayback Machine to the spring of 1944. And roughly, I think it's around May time frame, the P-51D model was just starting to make its way over to England and be assigned to squadrons. They were running the B model and C model, which didn't have this bubble canopy. It had more of like a Razorback style canopy that had a glass up here and then straight fuselage through here where it was all aluminum. So the D model is what you see here, and that included the new bubble canopy. This deck area here was lowered to make it a little bit better visibility around the tail of the aircraft. And this is kind of the more iconic P-51 Mustang. So as these were beginning to arrive in England, this particular one was assigned to the 361st Fighter Group, known as the Yellow Jackets. They were preparing the invasion on the continent. So there's a couple things that happened right around that same time period. P-51s that were assigned to the 361st were designated to go to the continent shortly after the invasion. They were to provide ground support operations and go with the ground crew or ground troops as they progressed through France. They were to be supported by P-47 Thunderbolts that were also being moved there. A lot of the other P-51 fighter groups were going to be kept in England and be used for fighter escort and bomber escort as they traditionally had been done. So the worry is that when these aircraft painted all, basically bare aluminum, shiny silver here, were sent over to the continent, that while they were sitting on the ground, they would be easy to spot by the Luftwaffe and susceptible to ground attack. So P-51s that were in service around the May time frame and prior to that were ordered to be painted all upper surfaces kind of a dark color, either some sort of a dark green, either olive drab or RAF dark green, depending on what they had. The 361st was actually based at a RAF field, and so they used a lot of the RAF green paint, dark green paint, instead of the olive drab because they had it available to them. So the model of Lu 4 that I have, I'll throw a picture up and you can see it. That shows the upper surfaces all painted over dark green. to make them less visible from the air when they move to the continent. Now, Ferocious Frankie here is a little bit different. You may notice that it has the some green on the upper surfaces, but that's actually from a different time period. So this particular aircraft, when it is delivered from the factory, it has this anti-glare panel up here, which is traditionally olive drab, and this particular one, it's RAF dark green, but it's some sort of a dark green color, and it would have the national insignias on it and the bureau number. From there, they will add the nose art for the crew, the pilot's name, and ground crew associated to it here, as well as the squadron markings. Now, just before the D-Day invasion, the orders came down that any aircraft participating in the D-Day invasion were to have invasion stripes added to it. The only exception would be is heavy bombers that were not being used for reconnaissance, or I guess basically call them VIP tours, where they would fly a lot of the generals near the beaches in B-17s and B-24 so that they could observe what's going on. Transport planes, light bombers, medium bombers, fighter aircraft, attack aircraft, anything operating, reconnaissance aircraft, anything operating in the beachhead area was ordered to have invasion stripes added. Now, these were added very much at the last minute and were painted on by paintbrushes, mops, basically anything they could find laying around, because they had to paint so many aircraft. The painting was extremely rough. When you look at a restored airplane, the lines are all perfectly crisp and exact. That's not at all how they were. They grabbed whatever they had available to them and started slapping on white and black paint over the aircraft. Now, when this aircraft would have been flown on D-Day, it would have not only had the invasion stripes on the bottom that you see here, but those invasion stripes would have continued over the top of the aircraft here, over the wings and over the fuselage. So that was to protect the aircraft from basically friendly fire. Underneath, the invasion stripes helped tell ground crews, ground gunners, and naval gunners that this is a friendly aircraft, do not fire on it. From above, it told fighter aircraft that were providing top cover for the invasion that that's another Allied aircraft, do not open fire on it. It was expected that the Luftwaffe was going to put up quite the fight on D-Day to repel the landing forces. That never actually came to fruition. The Luftwaffe really was a no-show on D-Day, thanks to a lot of the efforts done by the 8th Air Force leading up to the invasion to really break the back of the Luftwaffe, and it really did pay off. The Luftwaffe just wasn't really a factor on D-Day. So, roughly around the time of basically June 18th, June 20th, somewhere around there, it was pretty obvious that the Allies now had a beachhead well established. They also had air supremacy. The Luftwaffe was a pretty much no-show over the landing area, and they really didn't need to have the invasion stripes over the top. For aircraft that were moving to the continent, that would just make them even easier to spot from the air with these bright white and black stripes over the top of the aircraft. It also would make them more susceptible to be found by the Luftwaffe if they were operating closer to Germany or closer into France, and in areas in which the Luftwaffe was operating from. That would make the aircraft easier to spot. So the order came down, remove all of the invasion stripes. And there was a couple ways that this was done. They were either removed by just basically pouring gasoline over them with rags and just wiping them down. Here's a picture. I'll show you my P-47 here. That's the 1.2 meter P-47. And that aircraft, when it moved from England to France after the invasion stripes were removed with gasoline and paint thinner just to get rid of them, and the bare aluminum was left showing. The other way that the aircraft were covered over was to simply paint them over. So what you see here in this orientation, the green over the wings and over the top of the fuselage here denotes that this aircraft was flown post the order to remove the invasion stripes. That puts this aircraft sometime past the end of June 1944. Another interesting note is this yellow nose. So most people associate Ferocious Frankie with the yellow nose that is basically all yellow up on top here. I'll show you. Here's a picture of Lu 4 that I have my 1.5 meter, and you can see that's the yellow nose that most people associate Ferocious Frankie with. Now, in June, July of 1944, the only aircraft from the 361st that had that full yellow nose was actually Lu 4. That was the commander's aircraft, and he had the very first one that had that much yellow applied to the nose. All the other aircraft just had the leading edge of the cowl and the spinner done in yellow. It wasn't until fall of 44 that they started to paint more of the yellow on the nose of the airplane. So the way this aircraft is painted right now, it replicates how the aircraft would have looked sometime in late summer 1944. Eventually, this aircraft was transferred to a new pilot, a newcomer to the fighter group, the squadron, and that airplane was destroyed. There is a restored version of Ferocious Frankie that I mentioned earlier that's really close to what the ParkZone model was painted as, and that has all the green upper surfaces. It has the white ETO stripes on it and the full yellow nose. That is not the original plane that flew in World War II. That is a restored version. And a lot of restored airplanes are not historically accurate. They play on a couple themes that were historically accurate, but they combine them together to kind of make something a little bit more unique. That trend is starting to go away now in the full-scale world, where the restorations are now putting the airplanes back to exactly how they would have looked when they were in service, rather than being a kind of a composite aircraft of a number of different schemes. Because this particular airplane would have seen a couple different schemes through its flight history. So you could have shown it without any of the invasion stripes on it at all, and you would have been like, oh, well, that was May 1944. You could show it with all the invasion stripes on it. You'd say, well, that was the beginning of June 44. You can show it the way it is here, which is second half of summer 1944 and probably into the fall. And then there's the restored version as well. So like I said, there's a lot of variation that happens when you're with these aircraft in wartime. They're not consistent day after day, month after month. The schemes changed a little bit. Aircraft changed hands. They were repainted. They were adjusted and changed. The higher ranking pilots would get new airplanes and they would put a new scheme on them. The older planes would be transferred down, and those people would change the schemes up with what their likings were. So there's a lot of variation that goes on. So you really got to pay attention and really look and study wartime pictures and the dates of when those pictures were taken in order to fully understand what those airplanes would have looked like. So, like I said, there's been a lot of comments online about this scheme. People don't understand it, why it looks like this, but now you know. The green over these surfaces here denotes that this is late June through summer of 1944 when the order came down to remove the invasion stripes from the airplane. So the aircraft did look like this. It did fly like this. This is not a fictional scheme at all. I know some people like the restored scheme, but it does look good, but that's also probably what most people are used to seeing. Not many of us were around in 1944 in England to see this one in action. And honestly, there's actually not a lot of pictures of P-51s in action from the 361st. I have a book called The Yellow Jackets, which is dedicated just to this fighter group, and you'd be surprised, out of that entire book, there's not nearly as many pictures of these in action as you would have expected, especially post D-Day invasion. I think the frequency of missions and things like that, taking pictures was kind of one of the last things that was done. However, one of the most famous P-51 pictures of all times was done with the 361st, and that's the one with Lu 4 leading a flight of 4 P-51 Mustangs, and that's a very famous picture. Ferocious Frankie took part in the same photo shoot, but not in that formation. It actually did a dummy bomb drop for the photographers. It shows the airplane above cloud level dropping a pair of 500-pound bombs, which they would have not dropped from that altitude because you have no way to sight the target. So obviously it was done just for photography purposes. And that's really some of the only pictures we have of the aircraft. So that's why the scheme looks the way it does. So what did I do differently on this aircraft compared to how it looked out of the box? So one of the things I noticed that was missing right away, and I don't know how it got missed, is the ETO stripes on the top of the horizontal stabs were missing. They were on the bottom, but they weren't on the top. So I went through and I added the ETO stripes to the top of the horizontal stab. From the pictures I've seen, they most certainly appear that they are there. All the other aircraft in this time period and in this series all had that, so I added those back in. Otherwise, paint-wise, there's not a lot I did. But one thing that I have noticed from working on a lot of my warbirds is that the invasion stripes tend to be bare foam, and that just it never looks right. It never really looks like white paint. So what I've done more recently on a lot of my 1.2 meter warbirds is I take white paint and I hand brush the invasion stripes. I just go over the foam with a white paintbrush. And what that does is a few things. One, it gets rid of the bare foam and makes it look a more brilliant, vibrant white rather than the foam. It protects the foam cells, which can sometimes collect dirt and stuff inside of them. But one thing I love about doing that is by using kind of a wide paintbrush, it mimics the brush strokes that were used when these were painted in the field. And so when you go right along the edge of the black or the edge of the white, you get kind of a streaking motion from the paintbrush that looks very much how these aircraft would have looked on D-Day with the invasion stripes. So it's kind of a cool little thing that I do to kind of spice the airplane up a little bit and make it look a little bit more wartime ready rather than a pristine restored version with the exact perfectly masked invasion stripes. So I did that. I also did a little bit of weathering on it. I also painted the exhaust stacks, which are about 4 or 5 different colors of paint that I use to kind of get that right level of oxidation and rust and heat exposure on them. And then, of course, I did the exhaust staining on the aircraft using pastels. There's a very minor amount of exhaust staining I did on this aircraft. It would have only been in service probably for, I don't know, probably about 6 or 8 weeks when I kind of have it in this configuration. So I didn't go crazy with the weathering. And then, of course, to seal the airplane up, with the weathering and everything, and then I went over it with a clear coat as well. But I used 2 different types of clears. So I thought that the green, which is really British RAF dark green, the yellow was a little too bright. It's too glossy for how that paint would have looked in the battlefield. So I used a matte finish over the green surfaces and over the yellow surfaces, which I think helped quite a bit make that look less like just regular old plastic and make it look a little bit more like paint. I could have taken that all apart and actually painted it, but I decided not to go that crazy with this airplane and try to keep it simple. But just by using the dull coat over those surfaces, it really helped knock that shine down. And then I used the gloss on the silver, and that seals in any weathering on the airplane and keeps the wings nice and shiny on the aluminum and dull on the painted surfaces. The other thing I did is I went over the landing gear doors, and I painted the invasion stripes on here as well. And those are, of course, hand painted, kind of rough, just as they would have looked on the real aircraft when they were kind of painted. They're not exactly lined up one-to-one when the gear doors are retracted, just because they were painted on the ground with the wheels down, and the ground crews just kind of did the best they could. So I kind of mimicked that just by painting the black and white stripes on there. I also added painted the IFF lights on here, which I learned are actually on the wrong side of the aircraft. The IFF lights are actually over on the right side and not the left side. And then painted some clear green and red over the lights as well. They're non-functional. There's no LED lights in here. There's no nav lights, but I painted over the lenses with transparent green and red. Now moving on to the scale detail bits. There's a few things that I looked at right away and says, I got to do something about it, and the cockpit was definitely one of those areas. I thought the cockpit was a little bit bland with the just the silver inside and the pilot's head and nothing else in there. So I took the cockpit apart. I 3D printed a seat for it with a headrest and the armor plating. I built the radio stacks for it and just kind of made a single piece here. It was really a quick design effort in CAD to knock that out, and then a friend of mine, Chuck, was kind enough to 3D print those for me. Also 3D printed a gun sight, and I just took a piece of plastic from a to-go container, cut that out, dropped it in there as the reflector sight. And then I also decided that because it's a wartime P-51, it needed the pylons or the hard points underneath here. I kept those very simple. I did not add any bombs or fuel tanks underneath here. The reason is because I do plan to belly land this airplane, and anything hanging down would just get torn off. So I simply just made a real simple looking pylon, but as the aircraft is kind of coming towards you, it looks the part a little bit more of a wartime P-51 with those installed. So just a few little details. I did also add the antenna on the back here, which I found that a zip tie end works remarkably well because it's flexible, and those are easy to bump. So like I said, not a lot of detailing on this. Yeah, you could go nuts on this thing and really detail it all up, but I thought that would kind of take away from the spirit of the airplane, which is that simple airplane that's enjoyable and fun to fly. And I didn't want to turn it into another full-blown repaint and detailing and come up with something that was too nice to fly. The intention of this airplane is to go out and fly it. I did the exact same thing on my old Tower Hobbies plane, which is about the same size, except I fabricated a lot of these pieces out of balsa, and I didn't have the 3D printing capability and CAD at the time, so I fabricated it out of balsa, so I made a little bit better design out of this one here. But it's just a little bit of weathering, a little bit of detailing, a little bit of paint can go a long way in really improving how these aircraft look. And plus, I really enjoy it. A lot of people don't. I expect to get a lot of negative comments on why I wasted my time doing it, but at the end of the day, I really enjoy that part of the hobby. I enjoy the history part of it. I enjoy the modeling portion of it. I enjoy the detailing. It's really fun for me to do, and because of that, that's why I do it. I don't do it because people on the internet like it or don't like it. I do it for me, and I really enjoy doing it. So hopefully you guys will see some of the details I did on this and be inspired to do the same to yours. I hope you learned a little bit more about the 1 meter P-51, both in terms of the scheme that's used, the historical significance behind it, as well as a lot of the new upgrades and everything that have been done to this aircraft that really make it different than the ParkZone model. Even though it was inspired by the ParkZone model, it's not the same as that model. I can't stress that enough because that's a pretty common misconception online right now, that is simply just that airplane again, and it is not. It is a ground up, brand new design. So it's going to be a while before I can fly it. Unfortunately, winter is here in Michigan, and it'll be doubtful I will get this aircraft into the air before springtime, but fully expect me to come back with a video after I do get a chance to fly it and experience AS3X Plus. And if I really like AS3X Plus, I do plan to upgrade a lot of my 1.2 meter warbirds to fly with that as well. And I'm really hoping that this year to fly more warbirds. I went a couple years with flying them not nearly as much, and I think that this airplane will most certainly get me back into flying and enjoying the warbirds, and also to have something that has all the warbird looks without the warbird headaches will be nice as well. I could take this to the flying field and fly it and really just get back to enjoying flying fighter planes, which is something I really love to do, and I just haven't been able to get enough of that done lately. So if you guys got any questions or comments, by all means leave them in the comments section below. I'm more than happy to help out or answer any questions, and I hope you guys enjoy it and subscribe because I'll have more content coming on the 1 meter P-51 Mustang from E-flite.